Welcome everybody to the session of supply chain compliance and its impact on African textile industry. My name is Jasper Bhaumick. I'm from Germany and I'm working in the software industry. For 2 years now, I take care about the topic of supply chain compliance. The 4 questions I want to tackle are: what is a new global gateway? What impact have supply chain acts? How can Africa and Europe benefit from it? And what has, of course, this pundit to do with it? The global gateway is actually the European answer on the Chinese Silk Road belt. An investment of 300 billion euros is planned until 2027, and it's actually in all infrastructure areas where it has to be invested. What is important for the topic today is that all this has to be invested fair and sustainable. So by that, it directly also tackles the topic about supply chain compliance. There are several supply chain acts around the world. Professor Hartmann already went into the details of supply chain due diligence within her session just before. So I just want to recapture a few elements of it. Supply Chain Acts define the corporate responsibility of companies for the compliance with human rights within their supply chain. All of these supply chain acts are mainly based on the UN guidelines for corporate accountability from 2011. The newest one is the German Supply Chain Act from 2021. There were others before in Australia and UK, the Modern Slavery Act. In the US, there were some about supply chain transparency. In France, they have a similar one like the Germans. And in the Netherlands, they focus mainly on child labor. So what is so special about the German one? It is new, and it's actually, in my personal opinion, the one that is nearest to the UN guidelines. However, I believe that the EU Supply Chain Act, which is going to be prepared right now, it will be a little bit more stronger even. Professor Hartmann also went into the details about what corporate accountability means. So we have seen that you have to identify risks, you have to analyze risks. In case that you see some areas which are problematic, then you have to take action. And on all your actions, you also have to check if they were effective. Then there is one special point, which is that you have to establish a complaint mechanism. That one is not only valid for the people in your own company, but it's also available, or it has to be available for the staff within your supply chain. And besides the staff, also NGOs have to be able to use this complaint way, which could be by phone or by mail or something like that. Depending on the size, you have to have transparent and public reporting. Of course, these things are valid in that way for companies that are acting in Germany and have a specific size. However, what they will do is they will request from their suppliers that they have similar points where they act on, so they don't have the responsibility all on their own. The German Supply Chain Act is not meant to protect German companies. It is meant to protect the working staff around the world within supply chains of German companies. And it will be similar as soon as the EU Act comes into action. In my opinion, that is a perfect chance for a partnership instead of dependency. And it will support as well the African as also the European countries. The Supply Chain Act gives the responsibility to companies to assist gaining the compliance in human rights and environmental standards. Moreover, it is also there to assist in enforcing the additional cost, so there is nothing that has to be paid only by the supplier. And last but not least, it also has to assist with checking the compliance, which is an important factor where auditors and so on come into action. Also, that is costly, but has to be efficient. On the other hand, what will the EU gain from that? The European Union, as such, has much more policy based on partnership instead of invasive expansion policies of non-European countries. And corporate partnerships based on human rights and supply chain compliance will lead to long-term security of supply, even on scarce raw materials. So that is the advantage that the EU will have, and on the other side also the African countries on both sides. The African Union has defined the Agenda 2063 to increase wealth all over Africa. To increase wealth, you have to increase the wealth of the middle class. That's a key factor for every industrialized country. Middle class wealth is determined by income and health. And these two topics are also the ground pillars for corporate accountability. So, practically, the German Supply Chain Act and later on the European Supply Chain Act will go hand in hand with the idea of the African Union Agenda 2063. Supply chain acts are a challenge for European companies. However, that's why they can become an African opportunity. And I want to show how. So the first topic I want to tackle is the climate. Projects in Africa with the same amount spent in Europe which have a much bigger effect on climate. This is valid for energy projects, reforestation, or agriculture. Then European companies have several issues in some Asian countries with human rights. So that's why they are looking for alternative sources. And of course, they are looking also for the necessary political support in the countries they want to source in the future. In the third place, the pandemic has shown for European countries also that they have an issue with the security of supply. So they want diversity in the supply chain. And actually, because Africa is nearest to Europe, they could also have advantage of the shorter transport ways. Last but not least, there's a topic about the refugees, which is an issue for Europe, as it is also for Africa, of course, but the other way around. But for Europe, African wealth would mean directly more political stability, which is one of the big issues. So that's why Europe is looking for impact investments. The money is available and it's only a question of the right projects. Then we have seen that even on political level with the Global Gateway Initiative, Europe wants to reduce dependency on Chinese supply with supporting other countries to be independent from China. I want to take an economic view from 4 angles on the Supply Chain Acts. First of all, there's the African advantage, the increase of local wealth, which goes then hand in hand with the increase of political stability. And because the Supply Chain Acts also cover environmental standards, it will also be an advantage of environmental recovery within Africa. In the next step, there are some corporate advantages for the European companies, and that is the better partnership to important suppliers, which Africa contains. And by that, to assure a long-term access to necessary resources. Europe does not have too many own natural resources, so that is an important topic. And natural resources also include human capital, which Africa has. So it's not only about raw materials, but also about semi-finished and finished products. Then there is a EU political perspective. The EU wants to become a stronger political partner. That is also shown by the Global Gateway Initiative. It wants to enhance the cooperation with important supplying countries, which Africa contains a lot of. Last but not least, there are the European consumers, and even they have an advantage, even if they have to pay a little bit higher prices. Higher prices in that case determine mid and long-term wealth stability because of the advantages within Africa and the corporate advantages about secure supply on the other side. Moreover, consumers will have lower taxes because Europe has to spend less due to foreign political instability. In between, I was talking about the advantage for Europe if Africa becomes more wealthy. And I want to show with these argumentation chains why that is the case. So the first example is less child labor means more school education. And again, all over the world, it was every time true that more education means less wars. And less wars, again, mean less refugees of war. It also means less military intervention from European countries again. So that is also a financial advantage. Moreover, education means higher income. So there we also have the circle to less child labor. But moreover, higher income means also less economic refugees. And less refugees, independent from war refugees or economic refugees, mean less populism in Europe. Then there's the second part about environmental standards and the compliance with these. If Africa becomes more compliant with environmental standards and European companies have to finance and support that, then there will be more agricultural county, a better food supply, and by that, less poverty. A big part of environmental standards is drinking water. So more drinking water again means a better food supply. If it is an economic advantage, I don't know, but at least it is a worldwide advantage if we have less species extinction. And that we get by nature conservation, which again is one part of environmental standards. So it will not be possible, for example, to reduce the amount of woods for the wood industry. You have to reforest whatever you take away. If companies are responsible, they also have to take about less uncontrolled waste disposal. which means more healthy oceans and better fishing. All advantages for Europe and every country in the world. Last but not least, that means that wealth in all countries is an advantage for the current industrialized countries. So they ensure with the Supply Chain Act their own future. That's a very important topic in the discussions about the support and the prices and the impact of supply chain compliance. As we have seen, the Supply Chain Acts are an advantage for everybody. So the next step is to participate in implementing corporate accountability. And actually that is valid not only for the companies, but also for NGOs, politics, and academics. For all, the main goal should be get Supply Chain Act practically work. That is only possible by working together to verify and enhance the process to ensure effectiveness, by inviting NGOs and interest groups into the network about complaints, and by becoming a partner for the auditing. As we have seen, supply chain compliance is an advantage for everybody. So the question is, what can be your role in the corporate accountability ecosystem? There will be auditors that have to make sure that what companies say, if they say they're compliant, is true. There will be consultants that will help companies to become compliant, because not everybody knows exactly what to do to become compliant. We all know that there will be always some areas where some companies are not compliant yet and try to get around the system. And that's where interest groups come into action. They have an important role to make sure whatever happens on the auditor and consultant side is verified. There's also something about workers' voice that's also part of the interest group. So they can do the complaints whenever they see something that is not okay. There will be some partners, like the African Chamber of Trade and Commerce, that push the topic of supply chain compliance and help to spread the topic to all suppliers. In Germany or in Europe, there are already some rules about how finance and investment may take place. So also that is an important role, because these financing elements are just allowed for companies that are already on a sustainable track. So that is very important. Last but not least, there will be an auditor administrator, but that is a very special rule, because that one has to verify that the auditors know what they have to do. So based on that, there are different areas of impact on the African economy. Of course, what we have seen all the time is, based on the new law, you will be able to be competitive even with fair wages, and there will be a higher local income. There will be an extension of the local consulting industry and a new local auditing industry. So there are three elements where directly African wealth is increased and the economy is strengthened. Now it's time to take the initiative and to get financial support. There are several services that will be necessary to implement and to control compliance. And European companies are aware of that these costs are going into the product price. Either they put it into their product price because they have paid the audit before, or the audit is paid locally and then taken into the price of the pre-product. So there will be a local industry that is controlling these kind of things because that one is much less expensive than to do it from Europe and to send people for the audits all over the world. The measurements that are necessary in Africa can be financed by the EU and its companies. So that's important there. So what is necessary? Actually, you need to establish training and implementation consulting for corporate accountability. You have to set up reliable and local auditing teams. Reliable means they have to be approved by another authority. In my opinion, currently, because it's a EU law, it will be a European company also approving this. You need to develop teams to negotiate contract changes because higher prices, which are necessary because of the new compliance rules, are not necessarily in the current contracts. But European companies have to pay also for this compliance. And that is something that has to be negotiated. So it's not a topic where the local company has to bury all the costs. To support all that, you also need an IT infrastructure and IT specialists. They will assure that procedures are kept and that also the financing of all the measurements can be optimized and projects will be successful. Actually, supply chain acts, and by that corporate accountability, support a lot of sustainable development goals of the UN. More than half of it, actually. So of course, because of the growing wealth, the result should be, the aim is no poverty. Zero hunger, because agriculture areas are better and you will have more food supply. Good health and well-being. Quality education, because children can go to school instead of going to work. Clean water is part of the environmental standards. Responsible consumption and production is, of course, also a part of the environmental standards that come into action. Climate action, life below water because of the waste management, live on land because less destroyance of environmental resources, and last but not least, also peace and justice and strong institutions because there will be less populism and more education. So these kind of things are all covered just based on corporate accountability. So it's a very, very important new initiative all over the world to bring this corporate accountability from the UN from 2011 now into action. I mean, we have 2022, so it already took 10 years, and it will take probably another 5 to 10 years to be really working. Africa does not only have to react on supply chain acts from Europe. In my opinion, it's time for Africa to take the driver's seat for corporate accountability on human rights and environmental standards. Because it's a direct advantage for Africa and it's directly the implementation of the African Union Agenda 2063 to increase wealth. With Bispando, we just have developed a system to support all participating groups even small companies with low budget to take part in a business network for compliance within the supply chain. The whole system will be for free for all absolute necessary services, and then there will be some additional services which of course have to be payable, but the main topic is that everybody is able to participate. So it's a big network, and different auditors, different consultants, different companies will be able to join, and you will be able to see and get transparency into your supply chain. So why I'm saying that Africa can take the driver's seat is, if Africa defines rules for corporate accountability in the same way to be able to match the European Supply Chain Act, that will make a more unified solution for everybody. So you don't have to have 2 or 3 different certifications and similar things, but you will have one that is then valid for everybody in the supply chain. To be compliant within the supply chain, you need supply chain transparency. To get this transparency effective and with low costs, it is important that everybody takes part in the definition of the supply chain. That means in our system, you only invite your tier 1 suppliers, but also ask your tier 1 to invite his tier 1 suppliers. By that, you already get tier 2 suppliers, and so on and so on. There is no limit about that depth. If you have the supply chain ready and transparent, you will also see, okay, what is his, or what is are the results within the supply chain. So even if you yourself have a green result, it might be that your supplier, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, is not compliant, and you can take care of that. Still, you have the main effort only to deal directly with your tier 1 suppliers. And that is the advantage of this system. One of them. Within the system, you will see your compliance status. You will see what you have to do. You will see some news about your audits, about your supply chain, and their audits and results and so on. Some information about your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 compliance. And down here, you will even see on each level how many of your suppliers are compliant or not even answering and filling out the questionnaires. All that is part of supply chain compliance that is requested, and actually that is requested from Europe. So it's coming over to African companies, and even they have to look into their supply chain to be overall compliant. All that can be done only via web services. So you don't need to have a FATCAN or similar things. It will be easy to invite. You will be able to surf through your whole supply chain. As everything is similar for our companies, it will be efficient to monitor these risks. And we will have down here standardized questionnaires. So depending on your industry and your size, everybody gets the same questionnaire. If you have any further questions about supply chain compliance, please contact me. I will be able, and moreover, for more details, you can take a look at the 2 websites, www.caris.com or www.bispando.com. I hope you enjoyed this short or longer introduction into supply chain compliance and the advantages for the African industry. Thank you very much for listening.